This is the Forgecast, your eye into the who's who and what's what in cybersecurity and the cloud. Each episode, we bring you fresh perspectives, personal stories, insights, and advice from leaders, innovators, and change makers forging a stronger future.
Welcome to the Forgecast. I'm your host, Ernie, and I'm pleased to have with me today Vinnie Liu, the CEO and co-founder of Bishop Fox. Vinnie's been in the industry for several decades now, and he began his career way back when with the National Security Agency, the NSA. Bishop Fox is a leader in offensive cybersecurity, and we're going to dig into that today. So, Vinnie, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Ernie. Appreciate the invite and look forward to our conversation today.
Excellent. So, for those listeners that don't know who Bishop Fox is, tell us at a high level what you guys do, kind of what the mission is, and why you do it better than your competition.
I'd say I always like to think of it as like, how do we do it differently than our competition, and how are we different than our competitors? And one thing you said, their mission is something that I think is really, really a big differentiator for us. We are an incredibly mission-driven company. Our job is to keep people safe online and offline, and we realize the impact of the work that we have done and will do. And the work that we do is to provide offensive security services to Fortune 1000, large enterprise, mid-sized enterprise, and some of the mid-market. But we really grew up in that space, looking at some of the most complex network environments, some of the most tangled applications, some of the most interesting products, some that haven't even hit the market yet. And our job is to find vulnerabilities in those assets and systems so that our clients can remediate or fix those before bad guys find them. And, you know, one way that I think about our job differently when I describe it to the layman, our job is to find problems before the bad guys do, so that our clients can get ahead of the bad guys. And that's really our job. Every day, you know, we go head to head with some of the most sophisticated, most skilled attackers, adversaries in the world, and we protect our clients.
Yeah, when people ask me, you know, what you guys do, I say, hey, there's a lot of offensive security companies out there. But when you need the best of the best, you want the SEAL Team 6 of pen testers, you go to Bishop Fox. And I think that's a huge differentiator. So, you know, you and your co-founder, Francis Brown, started the company back in 2005, I believe. Yeah. We're going to get into the details, more details, but, you know, let the audience know initially, why did you decide to start the company?
Well, it's interesting because at the time when we first started the company, we were just being asked by our friends who were working at other Fortune 100 companies. We were both working at Honeywell. We were doing and leading a lot of the penetration tests and the assessments and the reviews. They're doing that sort of deep technical vuln finding work. And we were being asked by our friends at other companies of that size, saying, hey, we've got extra work. Can you help us out? So we were kind of doing some moonlighting work. And we thought it was fun because we're just like, hey, we get to work with our friends. We're doing more cool stuff. We loved it, right? We're passionate about it. And I think that's kind of the core of this, is that we're passionate about what we do because we realize how important it is and the impact that it can have. And so really, for the first 6 to 7 months, it was a side gig. It was a thing that we did that was moonlighting. And then I remember in February of 2006. So we did start, I think, in Q3 of 2005, and then in February of 2006, we'd made the decision to say, hey, we could do this full time. Why not? Let's give it a go. We were really young at the time, and I think the thinking in our mind was, well, what's the worst that can happen? You know, and there's a lot of ignorance. There was a lot of like, who knows? It's just starting a company. Like, we didn't know what we were signing up for. And now that I look back on it, I was like, there was definitely ignorance. You know, at the time, I was like, well, this could be cool. But the beauty of it was, I think the fact that we loved what we did and we really enjoyed that work, for the first 2 or 3 years, we were really a lifestyle company. We were doing it because we were super passionate about it. And we were working out of a living room in Arizona, doing work for Fortune 100s. And it was incredible because we got to work on cool projects. We got to work with our friends. So as we grew over time, our clients kept coming back and referring us. And we would just hire other people that we knew were really great at testing, that were really passionate about it. And so we went down that path, and it became this really core cultural value of technical excellence and over-the-top service delivery. Because we were taking care of our friends. Again, it's like you would want to take care of your coworkers and your colleagues because they were your friends. And then you'd want to do really great service because they were also your friends. And I think that's really carried through. And for the first 13 years, we were bootstrapped. And that run, that phase, I'd say, was really, it established who we were as a firm that continues today. And it is that we hire people that we like working with. We work with clients in a way that I would want to be worked with. You know, there's a cultural norm that we have here. We say, be the people that other people want to work with.
No,
in terms of do what you say, how you behave.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. We'll jump into more details there because you did make that transition from bootstrap to what I call being venturized, getting your first institutional capital. So before we go into that, though, let's get back to your story. When I first met you, I made the erroneous assumption, hey, he's a tech guy, grew up in Silicon Valley, but actually you grew up in Kentucky. So kind of talk about your journey and how you got interested in cybersecurity.
Yeah, not too many people ask me questions in that direction. I grew up in Kentucky, and interestingly, like a lot of my family's from the South. And so it was definitely like not a place where there was a bunch of people working on tech. I remember because I found like the two other kids in middle school, and honestly, it started in elementary school. I was in elementary school. I remember my best friend, Mark, at the time, he and I were, futzing around with computers, playing video games, tweaking memory management to get enough extended memory so that we could play our video games. I mean, it started really young, and that was the whole point. And then it kind of evolved. And then I remember, I think it was really in high school where I found a couple folks that were really into computers as well, sort of at that next level. And that's where I discovered, I was on bulletin boards early on. I had a 1200 baud modem. Then I got like a 2400 and then a 14.4 and then like a 56.6. Like all that type of stuff. And then eventually getting into the internet through dial-up and found IRC, which I spent and wasted probably a massive amount of time on. But that was really my first exposure, and it was a pretty pivotal moment for me because then I started really to discover a lot more of what was out there. Frack, zines, the more of the scene. And that was really kind of my first exposure to it and got me really interested in I was like, I realized, there's a whole lot more here than like playing games.
Yeah. But my understanding is that you, at the age of 17, got a gig with the NSA. So can you talk a little bit how that came about and how that journey looked?
Well, it goes back to IRC. I still remember the guy's handle who directed me towards the NSA because he was actually Air Force, and I remember that he was working with the NSA, and he knew of a program that they had at the time. I don't think it's probably evolved at this point. I don't know that it was still the case, but I don't think it's still in place. But that program was designed and was in place to recruit sort of like the next generation of cryptologists, mathematicians, linguists, computer scientists into the NSA. And that program targeted high school students who were graduating. And so he put me in touch with that program. And that, I still remember my parents were really freaked out because they didn't understand what that was. And I didn't really understand what that was either. And at the time, the NSA was still pretty a black box. I think there was one book that was written about it, Puzzle Palace, if I remember correctly. And other than that, it was just sort of this like faceless agency. And that was kind of the start.
So had you applied to college already, or I'm trying to figure out the timing here.
Yeah, it kind of happens in parallel. It was actually really beneficial. The program allowed us, we were considered full-time employees. We'd get a salary, and we'd split our time between school and then coming back to the agency when school wasn't in. And there's actually several folks in the industry today. I won't call them out, but like there's a lot of folks that were in that program too that I still know of, and I've made a lot of really great connections. Because a lot of those folks, they're still out there, they're still active, and it was awesome. It was really cool. I gotta tell you, like I feel like I was like the lowest guy on the totem pole. Everyone else was just absolutely brilliant. I snuck in somehow.
Well, at that age, most kids are flipping burgers somewhere, and you're in the Puzzle Palace. So let's jump to you alluded to your work at Honeywell and E&Y, and how that kind of led you to start Bishop Fox. Talk a little bit more about what that transition was like, because like you said, there was a lot of ignorance is kind of bliss at that point. You didn't know what you were getting into, but as a bootstrap company, you don't have this capital coming in for VCs. You have to make payroll every month. So,
well, there were years we didn't pay ourselves. There were several years, and it's off and on, right? Like some years, like, I think we're doing pretty well. We can give ourselves a salary. And then other years, it was just like, we've got pretty low expenses. We can afford gas. We can pay for pizza. Like, that's fine. Yeah. So there were definitely ups and downs. I remember early on, like maybe 2.5 years in, there was just a moment where we were like, okay, look, Fran, my co-founder, and myself were like, number one, we made a commitment to our employees that when they joined, like they're going to get paid. So we're going to make sure they get paid. We were always really conservative with our spending. And I think a lot of that comes from, just like, I think my co-founder Fran and I were always a little more conservative with what we spent and what we've done. I don't know that either one of us has ever bought a new car before. I mean, to this day, I don't know that. Like we drove around this like beater, purple, faded 1993. Everything was manual, but the transmission Toyota Corolla for like a long time. I mean, we just were really scrappy about it. But there were a lot of ups and downs. And I think that's like maybe the message for anyone who's listening, who's like thinking about going on that journey. If you're not venture backed, you don't have the safety net, and one thing I'd also say, like, we didn't come from wealthy families, and we didn't have any rich uncles, or anything like that. We had nothing to fall back on. So we really had to make sure that we spent less than we made. And that was just kind of the short of it, but I think we grew up that way, and that wasn't anything unusual to us.
Was there any point where you and Fran were like, you know what, let's just go back to Honeywell. Let's get a enterprise job. This is too stressful.
Once a year. The entrepreneurship, which just having your own business, it's like it's you got to be able to like take getting beat down over and over and over again. It doesn't matter how big you are, you're still going to get beat down. You're going to get beat down every quarter, several times a year. And the only advice I can give you is like, this too shall pass. And the number of times that I've had to tell myself that this too shall pass, just keep that in mind. You just got to keep moving forward.
Yeah. No, it's, I'm sure it was tough, but you got to a point around 2018 when we met you, when Forgepoint met you, where you were considering taking venture capital and, like I said earlier, venturizing Bishop Fox. How was that? What was that decision matrix like? And why did you ultimately decide to go from this bootstrap consultancy to taking venture capital where you're giving up equity in the company and you're really, I mean, the amount of changes are, pretty monumental. Can you talk about that?
I think we've always tried to be really honest with ourselves about how we were doing and what our skill sets were, right? Fran and I always talked on a regular basis about and threw around ideas. But I think we were also really aware that we weren't always going to be the best at everything. Like, we're good in certain areas, but growing a business like that, I think at that point we'd gotten to about 20 million in revenue or so. And we didn't have budgets. We were operating a $20 million company. We did not have annual budgets. Mm-hmm. And the biggest issue that our customers had with us was we would send them invoices late or in the wrong quarter, or it was just that general operational aspect of things that we were not as good at. We're fantastic at the service delivery. We're fantastic at the technical work. But we were learning all of these things. We learned HR, we learned legal, we learned all of those things over that period of time. And every time something new came up, we'd have to go and learn it and be the person who figured it out. And it was really challenging. We'd try to hire, we'd try to grow, but we realized if we wanted to attract incredible talent, really high caliber talent, if we wanted to grow and take advantage of the market, which was growing faster than we could even grow organically ourselves, and then invest in what we believed the future of offensive testing was going to be, that we needed to get some funding. And that's really when the conversation started, was to figure out how do we do that? And venture was one of the ideas that was on the table. And ultimately that's the idea that really won out, because we felt like that was the optimal path for us as a business.
What did your employees think at the time?
We were selling out. We got a lot. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, because it's one thing to be, we were independent for 13 years, but a lot of those pain points, I think they weren't really visible to, the folks who were kind of delivering the work day to day, but for everyone else who was really trying to make lives better, both inside the company and outside the company, and take care of everybody. I mean, it was thankless. It was thankless. It was constant. Holidays, weekends, every single day. Imagine working every single day. We barely took vacations.
Yeah, I could imagine.
Yeah.
So, some of the employees thought you were selling out. By the way, this is the first deal I ever worked on, was the Bishop Fox deal on Forgepoint. Yeah. So it's a special place in my heart. But I guess the other piece too is you and other folks, Rob Reagan in the company, had other aspirations outside of consulting. So talk about some of those early thoughts and kind of blueprints on kind of taking this to be more than just a consultancy.
Yeah, we love what we do, and fundamentally what we do is we keep our clients safer. We help them protect themselves. So, whatever we do, as long as we're sort of driving towards that, I think that attitude and that culture, we're a very servant-oriented culture. We take care of our clients. We take care of one another. We knew that was going to be at the forefront. The way that we did it could vary. Consulting and providing professional services is one way to do that. But we also knew that there was a different way that had to be developed, because the scale of the problem, the number of technologies and assets that companies were deploying, how quickly that was deploying was changing a lot. And we couldn't keep up just by doing professional services. So we knew that technology had to be part of it, but we looked around at what was available and what other folks were doing. And we said, well, look, this is, we've been doing this for 13 years. We know exactly what every tool does. It's strengths and limitations. We know the problem that our customers have, right? We spent 13 years dealing with it, what needs to be built and need to be done. And that's where the genesis of our Cosmos platform came in. And so we ran some initial tests, and, we ran it against some of our customers, and the results that came back at first were mind blowing. We were getting criticals, and we're getting domain admin or root within 48 hours. And so we realized we were onto something. And essentially what it was this concept that we could build an Iron Man suit for our testers, that we could do this at scale. We could do this in a scale that we've never been able to do before. And so that's really kind of where both, and that's when I think about, like, again, the other driver behind the investment, that's what that was. And we realized we were onto something, and that we wanted to invest in it because it would allow us to go after our mission of taking care of people and keeping them safe.
It's an amazing story. And, fast forward to today, I think in the last 6 years, you guys have done 20,000 projects. Cosmos has won several awards, high NPS scores. So obviously you guys continue to be the leaders in the space. Today, when you think of differentiation in the market, there's a lot of companies that do pen testing. There's more automated stuff today, other startups. What helps you guys differentiate amongst a pretty crowded market, I'd say?
I think one of those things is, we are constantly researching the latest and greatest. We're staying on top of those threats and trends. That's one element that I think differentiates us. And, it's one thing to say that you've got great people. It's the other thing to actually show and demonstrate. And I think that's reflected in the fact that we continue to give back to the community and share thought leadership around useful things that people want to know about. Let's talk about the latest vulnerabilities that are out there. Let's give back. Let's share at conferences. Let's release tools and do those types of things. A lot of people can say that they're really good at things. I think when you show it by doing, that's one thing that I think we do differently. And a handful of firms will do that, but it's a small subset of the overall number of people that sort of like raise their hand and say, we can do this too. Well, we can prove it. And I think that's the difference. I'd say the other thing is that we also have a very different approach. And this is really, really a lot more to our roots. When we first started the company, we were doing work for our clients, and that they were also our friends. And so we invested a lot of our time to really understand their businesses, to understand what their real problem set was, because we knew that what we were doing was helping them as well. I think that's carried through to today. One of the things that I'd call out beyond just the technical aspects of what we do and staying on the cutting edge of that is when you work with us, you're surrounded by a team that is there to take care of you. Your entire experience is developed in a way that we're here to serve. And that's something that really unique, I think, that we invest in that not everybody else invests in, because we're not trying to churn you through as quickly as possible. We're not trying to do all this stuff. We're really trying to take care of you and your problem.
Yeah, it's really, it sounds like it's a customer-centric business. You guys are mission-focused. And I think what the team these days is how big? 300 people?
Somewhere? Yeah, I think a little under 350 or so.
There you go. Yeah,
which is wild to think about.
Yeah, that's decent size. What I want to do now is dive into the Cosmos platform, kind of describe what it is, what it does, and how your Fortune 500 customers are leveraging it.
Yeah. I kind of describe the Cosmos platform. It's a nation state caliber attack platform that we deploy in the defense of our customers. Our job is to find vulnerabilities what the bad guys do. So how do we do that? Number one, we are continuously profiling your external attack surface to understand what our attacker is going to see when they do their own research. In a lot of ways, unfortunately, we get lumped into attack surface management. Most attack surface management companies are like a data feed, that just shoves a fire hose of ones and zeros at you. That for us is just a byproduct, because the second thing that we do is we do this very rich attack surface analysis to gather information about your businesses and your attack surface, not just like where are your IPs and where are your ports, but we actually do a very deep instead of wide search. And we use that because we have to operationalize that in the second phase of what we do of the managed service, which is we actually will then test your perimeter and look for those weaknesses, the misconfigurations, the critical and high risk issues that may be exposed on your perimeter. And we do that for you. And so at the end of that whole process, you have somebody that's constantly watching your perimeter, your assets for changes, as well as for those emerging threats and vulnerabilities. And so you see that in a lot of cases where we've been able to find critical and high risk vulnerabilities, like those, the real hot ones that pop up, right? That Citrix and F5 and so forth, like those types of things we find very rapidly. And in some cases, we're the ones who have discovered them in the first place through our research and in the way that we try to protect our customers, because we see those technologies on their attack surface. And so we find them in 24 or 48 hours. And in many cases, before their own internal change management processes can keep up to do an ad hoc scan, or before those vuln checks are even released. And it's not a solution that gives you homework like a lot of vuln scanners will, that you've got to then go do more work. This is vulnerable. This is not vulnerable. Your vulns here are an issue that you've got to pay attention to. These 10 issues, 7 of them are non-exploitable. 3 of them are. If you got 10 instances of this that could be affected, we're going to tell you exactly where you need to spend your time.
It's amazing. So from back in early 2019, just some PowerPoint slides to having this robust platform today.
Yeah,
pretty amazing.
Yeah, I mean, we are, and I'm really proud to say that the team, the delivery team, is it's not just the tech, but the team, absolutely top notch. The NPS scores that we get back from our customers, the engagement levels, and we're doing it for some of the biggest banks in the world, some of the top retailers in the world. It's awesome to see how well this is scaled, which again is a big differentiator, is that we can handle some of the largest scale, some of the largest networks that are out there, and not everybody can say that.
So as think back to being the CEO when you were driving that Corolla you talked about, and
yeah,
no vacation, to present day, how have you evolved as a CEO, and kind of how has that journey been going from those early days to now, a company with almost 350 people globally, working with a good chunk of the Fortune 100 for that matter?
Yeah, I remember early days, we used to have a list of the Fortune 100 printed out and taped to the wall, and we'd just go through and we'd mark off like, hey, did we get to do work with them? Are they a client of ours? And today a lot of those boxes are checked, and we're really proud of that. I definitely have a lot more support these days, and that's a huge relief. The problems are bigger, but the team that I get to do it with, I'm really proud of the team that we've built at Bishop Fox. They're incredible. The culture that we have here around knowledge sharing between our technical folks, but also the way that we communicate and try to be as transparent as we can with everything, I think is a big point. I've always, and I remember this is a conversation that I had with Fran early on when we've had to make big decisions and we didn't have any advisors or anybody to talk to about it, just the two of us trying to think about how to, when you get these crossroads. It was interesting because I remember where we landed was, what we want to do as a business is that when we do come to these pivotal decisions, that we want to look back on those decisions and be proud of the decision that we made to do the right thing by our customers and our employees. And so that's really been the guiding principle for me as a CEO, that I think has continued to evolve as the decisions that I've had to make get bigger and bigger and have a lot more impact as we've gotten bigger and we deal with, had more employees or had more, bigger customers or larger contracts. Like those are things that are, that kind of come to mind when you ask about what's changed.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you guys have a lot to be proud of. It's a company that has scaled, it's kept its culture, and you've built a solid team. So hats off to you. No discussion would be complete unless I brought up AI and Gen AI. And recently our own Catherine Shee interviewed your Rob Reagan, who's kind of taken the lead, helping customers safely deploy AI and Gen AI, and leveraging those pen testing skills, TTPs, if you will, in this new area. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on how you guys are doing that, because it's early days, but it's very important.
It is early days. We've been really fortunate to have brilliant staff like Rob, but a whole team of others inside Bishop Fox that have been digging into LLM and Gen AI from the for years now. And we've also been really lucky to be working with customers who were early adopters of it as well. And so we've had the opportunity to, in real world scenarios, both very early to get in and start playing with those technologies and actively testing them, not even as, contracted projects, but just as, sort of thought partners. And so we've really had a lot longer in the space than many others, because what we're starting to see now is the commercialization of that, where a lot of companies are beginning to adopt it and integrate it into their products. We believe it is a seismic shift in the way that the technology and really in our lives, it is one of those types of shifts. We're excited that we've had, a year plus to be testing and experimenting with these things. Our team actually has a tremendous amount of experience with it, to the point where we're also implementing it for our own uses in our own business within Bishop Fox. And so we've got that perspective of both looking at it within really large software companies, e-commerce retailers and things like that, where the first use case is really customer service and helping to manage that. But we're starting to use that internally for ourselves as well, because we've gotten so familiar with the tech. We can see a lot of areas where it can accelerate what we're doing or enhance the quality of what we're doing for our customers.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this evolves, not only on the testing side, but across security for AI, which obviously there's a lot of focus on AI governance right now in other areas. So we're obviously keeping our ear to the wall and watching it very closely. Let's jump ahead to the future now. So you and your team have a very unique vantage point of seeing all these customers, some of them very, I'll call target-rich environments that the adversaries are going after. How do you see the landscape shifting over the next 2, 3, 5 years as far as threat actors, and then on the other side, defense of these critical companies and assets?
I think the future is one of, again, and this is our philosophy, so it's really reflected in our actions as well. But the future, there's two shifts that I've been observing. The first is, I think people are starting to look a lot more at the proactive aspects of security. How do you get ahead of breaches? And fundamentally, that boils down to finding the vulnerabilities and fixing them before they can be exploited. I think for the past 15 years, overwhelmingly, the market has been about incident response and detection of breaches and detection of bad activity. And it has always been basically, how good are you at taking hits? How quickly can you get up after you've been punched in the stomach? How resilient are you to that? But really, I think now when you look at the changes in regulation, the disclosure requirements, what that signals is, it signals, it doesn't really matter if you're responding faster or you've got an IR plan or any of those things. What matters is that you got breached. And if you got breached, then you need to disclose it. And now there's consequences to that as well. And they're being enforced. So that change also has shifted the way, and combined with people saying like, hey, if I just spent another $1 million or another $500,000 on detecting something, then in this really strange corner case, just a little bit better, like, what are you really getting out of that? Versus, oh, wait, maybe there's this whole area of proactive defense that I could be doing. And so we've seen our customers make that shift. Their investment in offensive security and in getting ahead of those threats and finding those issues before they get exploited, it's an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And really, people are starting to understand that. The regulators and the compliance frameworks are starting to shift in that direction. And so we're seeing a move there. So that has been one thing. But I'd say the other thing, and this is the part that I think is a belief that we hold. I don't know that everybody holds this belief, but the belief that we hold is that the work that we do for the foreseeable future will be a combination of human and machine. And that's how that problem set will be solved. I know there are people out there that are promoting their solutions which are fully automated or all AI or all something. And then there are others that are saying, like, we've got a bunch of people that are going to do this. And maybe, for in whatever format, whether it's the crowd or whether it's in a lower cost region or whatever, like there's two different camps. I think we're squarely in the middle where we think you really need talented people paired with technology to actually solve the problem at hand, to get you the answer to your question. Everyone's making their bets. This is ours.
Yeah, you mentioned a word earlier that is now probably trending, which is resiliency. Unfortunately, there was a global issue with an EDR provider that really opened the eyes of many companies about resiliency. And I know Europe has DORA, which I think is more focused on banking and financial services. But I mean, what are your thoughts on resiliency amongst enterprises?
It has. I actually first heard the word resilience used a lot when it came to like employee resilience to getting phished and things like that. But I think that term is a really good one to apply. It's a good lens to apply to almost anything within your organization, which is to say, like, what are your key failure points in security products, security solutions? Security vendors can be weak points in your risk register. And I think you've got to take that into account. And I think the recent global outages that have impacted a lot of companies are a good example of that. I think we have to consider the same thing when we think about cloud providers. The consolidation into a single cloud provider for some time, and then we've started noticing our larger customers expanding into a multi-cloud approach for that very same reason. You just don't want to wind up with a monoculture in certain situations. They did a proper risk evaluation on that. I don't know that security products and security solutions have gotten the same treatment, but it's a good example of what could happen when you've got something that critical deployed so homogeneously across your environment. And I'm not singling them out. I'm saying anybody could be like that.
Absolutely. Well, hey, Vinnie, before we wrap up, I have one last question, which I think aspiring founders will want to listen to. Before we do that, when you're not being CEO, my understanding is that you tend to go outside and do some things. What's your big hobby? How you kind of let off steam there?
Yeah, I'm really big into waterfowl hunting. It's something that I remember doing when I was very young, with my uncle down in the shore of Louisiana, and it's something I've kind of picked back up again, and that's where you'll find me when I'm not in front of the computer.
It's good to spend time in the physical world, right? So the last question, there's hopefully aspiring or very early founders listening to this podcast. And they're always looking for advice from people like yourself that have been successful here. What's some advice you'd give these folks, whether they're bootstrapping or they're raising venture capital?
Surround yourself with really good people. I have been blessed in my career to have gotten an opportunity to work with incredible people and those incredible people begat more incredible people. And I would say, as an entrepreneur, a founder, you're going to pour your heart and soul into the business. You're going to be spending a lot of your time doing this one thing. And it makes a huge difference when you can do it with people that you really enjoy being around.
Great advice, and easier said than done, right? It's difficult, but that is the key. Well, hey, Vinnie, thanks for your leadership, your perseverance, your passion for cybersecurity, and everything you do for your employees as well as your customers. So thanks again for taking time to chat with us.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ernie. I appreciate you having me on the Forgecast.
You got it. Take care.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode. Subscribe to the Forgecast, which is brought to you by Forgepoint Capital. We're a leading cybersecurity and digital infrastructure venture capital firm that invests in exceptional teams protecting the digital future. To learn more about Forgepoint, visit forgepointcap.com or find us on LinkedIn and Twitter.